we're back for another episode of the Bad Ideas podcast with Sid Vishwanath. How'd I do with the last name?
Dude, you nailed it. That was great.
Nailed it. Look at that. A little practice.
Yeah.
Sid, your last name I can get right, but your background is a little too long for me to encapsulate. Like, we can't even give you a title. You've done so much.
Man.
How do you describe yourself? How do you even think about, like, you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I guess preparing for this, I was like, I guess I got to talk a little bit about myself and my story in that. But it's quite easy to look back and go, hey, I have just been fortunate to have found some really cool opportunities. Some of those have worked, some of those haven't worked. I think even my first one, when I was at university in London, where I'm from, in case, that was a mystery, I met a guy called James who had been on this show called Dragon's Den, which is the British equivalent of Shark Tank. And I mean, I grew up watching him, right? So I was like fanboying him royally at this event. And one of his colleagues was like, hey, why don't you just come in and let's sort of talk? And I managed to wing an internship at his family office the summer I was about to graduate from college. And I think that first story has basically been how I've approached the rest of my career. And going back to it, I just think I've been lucky, right place, right time, in that I started out there, moved to the US, joined JP Morgan. I was like employee number 3 in this team called Intelligent Solutions, which was thinking about artificial intelligence, which, obviously everyone's talking about that today. Then I managed to swing a rotation in the blockchain team, and ipso facto, crypto's top of mind for everyone. So like super lucky. I wish I could tell you I had some crystal ball and saw into the future, but I've just been fortunate to have been able to follow my curiosity a little bit, but also find myself in opportunities that have allowed that to really come through. And most recently, over the last couple of years, I've been working in crypto. I was at Kraken for about a year doing ops and strategy, and then more recently at Blockworks, which is the crypto media company. Yeah, so it's been fun.
Two very insignificant players in the crypto space. I think we're going to post your LinkedIn profile at the bottom of this episode so people can see you. But it's amazing to get someone like you on the show who's like flown almost through all these different like major company pivots right at the right time. So you've seen a lot. I mean, seeing an industry grow from that level is just amazing.
Yeah, it's been fun. And look, I think it's interesting you use the term flu because sometimes it's been like really short, and it's been, hey, this hasn't worked. Let's move on. But I think for me, if I look back, I've learned so much, on the finance side, on the product side, and I wouldn't describe myself as particularly an expert in any of those fields, but it's been great looking back and saying, hey, actually you're fluent enough that you can get by. And so, yeah, as we transition to the next part of, what I'm going to do and how I'm working with, a variety of startups and scale-ups, those experiences have proven to be quite useful because you might not be able to think deep in one particular area, but you can think broadly, right? You can evaluate an idea from multiple different standpoints. And that's always been something that's more appealing to me than knowing one thing and knowing it really well. And I know sometimes that defies conventional wisdom. Like when I talk to my parents about, what do you mean? Aren't you supposed to stay in one company for 10 years, bro? Like not 10 companies in like 15 years. It's not how it works. And I appreciate that and I get that. But I don't know, man. Like it's really interesting. I talk to my friends about it all the time. You date like what, 6 or 7 people maybe on average before you find the one that you get married to. And so if it's okay for us to pursue relationships and get to know people, right? Like, in 4 months, 5 months stints, why wouldn't we apply that same lens to our professional career? I guess that's the approach I've taken.
HR managers across the country are reading this and they're like, no,
wrong, bad advice. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think the different experiences and just the different people that you get to work with. Like, imagine if university was that way. I think they try to by putting you in different classes. But what if you could like go study in entirely different locations every year with different cultures around you?
Yeah,
invaluable.
that would be awesome. And you don't even know. Like, there's so many things we think we know. We think we're super informed because information's at our fingertips. Especially growing up in like London or New York or just the United States in general. We're super lucky because we have information at our fingertips, and we think ourselves like super worldly wise, which in a lot of ways we are, but unless you go do something and you experience it, you just never know. And even my own start in crypto came like that. I was on that blockchain team at JP Morgan that I mentioned, super interesting. And around the same time, this whole concept of demonetization happened in India, where overnight the government was just like, "Yep, the notes that you use completely illegal, cannot use them anymore. Let's print new currency." And look, I am not qualified to form an opinion on whether that was the right thing to do or not, but I know what the downstream impacts were. I had like a 90-year-old grandmother complaining about the price of onions, and now she's going to pay for it. And you're like, hey, wouldn't it be great if there was some government resistant, censorship resistant money that someone just couldn't decide overnight that they can print, so much more, or they can just make something illegal because the person on the street gets, screwed as a result. And that's what piqued my curiosity into learning more about crypto in the first place. So I think none of these have been aha eureka moments. They've been, hey, I tried to learn about something, I learned it, and then something happened, and it just so happened that there was a couple of dots to be joined, and we just followed that down the rabbit hole. So yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun.
So you gave me a beautiful nugget earlier. Maybe it relates to this, but you mentioned like a broad framework to evaluate ideas, which is slightly relevant to what we're going to do. But can you talk us through that? Like when you uncover a new company or a new space that piques your curiosity, like how do you think about it, or how do you decide if it makes sense for you to spend time on?
Yeah, it's a great question. I kind of look at it in three parts. Like, one is, what problem is it actually solving? So you look at, Kraken as a great example, right? What a storied institution in the crypto space. It's like, hey, we're giving you the ability to securely on ramp and off ramp into crypto, and we're also going to give you the ability to buy and sell certain tokens, right? And you think, yeah, I, as someone who's interested in doing that, need that problem solved. I need that problem solved securely, and I need it done at scale because I don't want to have major price arbitrage in the grand scheme of things. Is just little old me sat on the corner. So like, great, this is a problem that we're going to solve. I think the second component of it is, where can it go after that? When I was working with James, and one of the best things that he used to do is, like, you start off, you have to focus, right? You have to focus. You have to do one thing really, really well, but you do have to have one eye at some time to how you're going to expand and what else you could do and how else you can bolt on either different industries or different products, etc. And you go, okay, if you can convince me that this is the best way for me to transact, what else can you convince me to do? Because I'm already going to for something. So it's like, what's the opportunity to either go deeper or go broader? Do you become like a super app to do lots of different things, or do you just become more and more complex? And then the third thing that I typically look at is, like, what is a story that you're going to tell the next 100 million people who come into the space, right? Like, why would they pick you and not someone else? So how do you stack up against the competition in the market? And it's really funny because, again, to like trace it back to a personal story. So my wife and I had two weddings. We had one wedding in London and one wedding in India. And for the wedding that we had in India, obviously it's a beautiful place, but it's a bit of an assault on the senses when you go there and you're not raised in Asia or in some place where, a billion people are kind of like in your face, right? So the test that we used for decisions that we were going to make as it relates to what we do in our wedding is, it's got to work for like my family. It's like, in India, is it going to appeal to the sensibilities? Is it going to work for our friends in the UK who know enough about India, like are aware of Indian culture, that are necessarily not going to appreciate some of the things that happen there? Is it going to work for our American friends, right? Because a lot of them had not been to that part of the world at all, and so the impression that they had of the country was a certain way. And is it going to appeal to sort of folks like us who were of Indian origin but sort of raised internationally? And then is it going to appeal to our like parents, friends, and that generation? Because it can't be too sort of left of field. And so those are 5 different constituents, right? And so for us to think about, hey, how does everyone have a decent experience, somewhere in the middle of India? You really have to think deeply about, okay, well, what's the experience going to be for like Ben from, Spokane, Washington, all the way through to what's it going to look like for, Auntie Sita from Delhi, and to a certain extent, I think you have to think about your idea that way as well. Like, who's going to be the next ICP? Who's going to be the next persona that you go after this one niche, if that's your ambition to continue scaling, goes. So those are typically the three big questions that I ask myself going into it. And then over time, depending upon the answers to those, we sort of shake left, shake right, and see what happens.
Interesting. So it's like a massive Venn diagram type of thing.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure you're operating in the center, but the Venn diagram covers enough area for you to grow.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a simple way to think about it. All right. Let's throw a bad idea at it and see how we do. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So we're going to have a big reveal to this idea that we have not seen before. Hopefully it's bad enough to make us laugh. Then we'll make fun of it for 5 minutes. And I think naturally try to see if we can turn it into something unique. Does this sound good?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, here we go. Today, our bad idea is ACH roulette. Transfers are randomly delayed anywhere between 1 hour and 6 months, adding an element of surprise to your business transactions. I mean, this sounds like the current ACH infrastructure.
Yeah, it totally does. Your transaction has been randomly flagged. It doesn't matter that you're paying your supplier and your business relies on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry. Well, okay, let's go through it. What problem is it solving, Nick?
I mean, this is a bad idea, so it doesn't solve any problem.
It creates problems, right?
Well, hey, let's look at it positively, right? This does create a problem. Maybe this business is one of those like choke efforts to get people to adopt crypto. And I'll use a comparable like the carbon tax. I think there's evolving science on like how effective it is, and I think we'd promote hydrogen power a little more forcefully if we were really trying to be green. But the carbon tax seems to be a financial incentive to get us to move to green regardless of its efficiency level. Maybe this is the same thing for crypto adoption. We'll make ACH so inefficient that you have to go into crypto.
Well, actually, it's interesting because a lot of really cool products have come out because the current process absolutely sucks. So if you put more of a speed bump, like let's TSA pre-check. Let's just use that as an example, right? You pay the $100 for 5 years, whatever it is, and it's an amazing experience, right? You walk in, so I don't have to take anything off. I have 2 small kids. They don't have to take anything. We have to take all sorts of nonsense for them as well. And it's just a fantastic process. But it exists because the existing security line is just so bad. And you feel, your stress levels go through the roof. So that exists. I mean, Clear obviously has come on top of that. So I think your underlying thesis of, hey, if we did ACH roulette and we just stopped a bunch of payments, would it push people towards an alternative rail? Yeah, I mean, I could run with that. I think it's a good premise.
Well, so stepping into your banking shoes, do the banks control the rails? Like, is ACH an independent service, or do the banks have their own protocols that they use? I don't know this.
So it's interesting. I'm not technically like fluent in explaining how it works, but I think there's 2 components of this. There's the actual like ownership of the rails and making sure that payments get sent from one place to the other, which is monitored by someone else, or a consortium. Like with Zelle, it's like a consortium of different banks. But the piece beforehand, which is this transaction fraudulent or not, and those checks and balances before it actually gets routed for payment, I think that is controlled by the banks. So you could, I mean, it's not inconceivable to turn around and say, hey, we've taken a sample of 150 or 200 transactions every day from across our X million business banking customers, and we played roulette, and we just want to turn around and see, hey, are these actually okay or not, and dig into that. So you just flag a random transaction, you make sure it's happening okay. I think Ramp does something similar when you're an expense approver, where it just plays like transaction roulette, and it shows you, hey, Nick just spent 2 nights at the St. Regis and flew first class on Delta. Do you want to double check whether his expenses are approved or not? So it could work. I mean, hey, Nick, this is maybe not that bad an idea,
It's a speed bump idea, right?
Yeah,
to make this inefficient.
Idea. Yeah.
What's the benefit to the bank, though? I mean, Is there a cost for them to use ACH? Do you know?
Yeah, I
Or is
think
that all
it's on a
passed
per
on?
transaction basis. I don't know
But
what
it's passed on to the customer, right? Like the
it
bank
should.
is
Yeah, it
not
should
the.
be. I mean, to a certain extent, when you're like, I
Yeah.
think if you're a really valuable customer, someone who has high throughput, I think they may have to eat the fee because they're
Yeah.
making money somewhere else. But I have to assume that's the case. Yeah.
Yeah, and they care about like the asset value more than they care about the transaction on the transaction fee there anyway. Like
I
card
think.
fees are
Yeah,
so much higher, right?
I think so. But I think the let's walk it back a second. You asked the question, which was why would this make sense for banks?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably a good way to test to see if your fraud controls are working with like ongoing monitoring and sampling. So you're like, okay, did this flag?
Mm-hmm.
You basically flag 100 transactions just for random check, and you
Mm-hmm.
know that your systems maybe flagged 5 of those, which are actually fraudulent or merit further investigation. And if in those 100 transactions, each time your fraud detection is actually bingo, yeah, these were right, but we checked against, the ones that were flagged but aren't actually fraudulent, you could use that to train your model. I mean, that's ultimately how those models have to be trained, right? Like, what's a type 1 error? What's a type
So
2 error? Get it right.
you're thinking like a B2B data service almost. So this thing just randomly pulls transactions to review.
Yeah, exactly. And over time builds a knowledge base of, hey, these types of transactions are okay, these actually need a memo. Because right now, when you send any type of payment, right, like you pull up whichever bank you use and you make a payment, you have a memo field that's optional, right? So you could write whatever random stuff. I mean, when I was
St. Regis and
you
Delta.
saying
Yeah.
Regis it, but I mean, you could write some nonsense in there, right? Like,
Yeah.
but if there's something that says, okay, these types of payments, when you do it, then the memo field is mandatory, and we can flag what types of transactions they are. Like they're over a certain amount, or they go to,
Mm-hmm.
they're in a certain industry, they go to a certain type of vendor. Like that, I think could be pretty cool. And then you get some intelligence on what types of payments are okay and what types of payments are not okay, and you're not caught with your pants down when there's actually a fraudulent event.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it is it like pulling teeth to get access to that data?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a third party, if you're a fintech trying to do this right now, yeah, I think it's going to be a nightmare to even get allowed to do that. I mean, there are some fintechs who do transaction. I mean, I think there's one called, I can't remember the name actually. It's named after a fish, but I don't know why I'm thinking tuna. It's not tuna. But there's one that does transaction, and I think they're quite successful at it. But I think the whole, how do you get access to data from a bank or a credit union is like a very very, very, very slow process, and something that turns a lot of people off. And I've seen it because I worked at a fintech, interacted with them, and God bless the people who spend a lot of time doing that. But it really is tough to do that.
Does blockchain invalidate this?
Um, yes and no. I think the fact that you have everything easy to look at, it's all tracked, it's immutable, you can't mess with it. Like that's great. But I think one piece that people tend to forget is that you might know the wallet address that you're sending the payment to, but to the rest of the world, they don't know who that wallet belongs to. Now, it may not be that difficult to find out if you spend time, you look at where all the other transactions are going, and you can figure out who
Mm-hmm.
that wallet belongs to. But when you're doing some meaningful fraud checks and balances, typically it's helpful to know who the person is who owns the wallet or the account on the other end, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
that piece, I know that there are companies doing it. There's a lot of companies that do sanction screening of wallets up front, which is really cool. But I can't conceive of a scenario in which you could get both, because people then have to be comfortable telling you what their wallet address is in the first place, right? Which they do in crypto, but are they really going to send that to a bank right now? Maybe if the regulation has changed, I don't know, but that could be another speed bump.
Your evaluation idea works really well, though, if it's just on a block, because the sender knows who they're sending it to.
Yeah.
So all the data is already accessible. And that's a pretty easy sales process. You just sit down with somebody and say, we did this in a simulation. Here's your data. Here's what it looks like.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think let's go back a step and constitute fraud. Like there's the fraud where you and I could get catfished by someone and we think we're
Yeah.
sending it to, this amazing person who we've befriended online, and it turns out that it's a scam being run out of insert location here. That there's no real sort of cure for that, unfortunately, right? But then there's the other piece, which is, hey, I as a risk manager at a bank am just going to screen these transactions and see if you're sending money to some illicit venture somewhere in a different part of the world. And I think in that instance, who you're sending the money to, right? Like if you know that you're sending money to, insert naughty organization over here, it doesn't matter that you know or you don't know. It's not you who's worried about that transaction. It's the institution and the government that's worried about the transaction. So not clear to me how we would separate the two, because both of them are fraud, but they look like, or not allowed, but they look like different things. You know what I mean?
So this is more of like a philosophical market question then, because we're going complete full circle, like your entire background in one question. Let's see how we do. So we talked about like your start in AI and then blockchain, and now we're talking payments and banking, all three in one. Blockchain and democratized payments and finance means more data on payments, more publicly available. AI means more junk data in general and more difficult training samples. And payments, I think, regardless of like political affiliation, we're moving into some new global payment system. Like that's happening from multiple different directions. And I think the days where like a handful of big institutions control everything is going to change one way or another. Maybe it's still the same handful controlling the new thing, but it's going to be a new thing. So wrapping all those together, more data, blockchain, publicly available transaction information, and a new system, that means all compliance and monitoring has to change and evolve too, right? So like the whole suite moves. It's not just the rails.
Yeah,
Right?
totally. I mean, you're going to need to have a database to know who owns what wallet, where the payments go. And the advantage, certainly from my perspective of DeFi in general, is just the ability to create a wallet quite quickly, right? I mean, there are some really cool AI-based companies right now that are actually trying to make the whole process of creating a wallet, sending a payment, bridging different chains, etc., as easy as just texting like an AI buddy, and making that transaction like, complete in a matter of like seconds, right? Whereas today, okay, yeah, we've made some strides, but it's still quite annoying to bridge and then fees and then hey,
Hold
can
your
I send
breath
it to
while
this?
it transfers.
Yeah, hold your
Yeah.
breath while transfer. And then you get the little circle of death, which is like, oh, the price that you quoted expired out. Like, try again. And by the way, the fees have gone up 3x. So there's ways. There's ways to do that. I think the issue that you're probably going to run into, which is solvable, is you're a bad actor, and there are some of these hacks that have happened recently. You know which wallet it's gone into, right? And what are you going to do? Just sit there and monitor that wallet forever? You can, but people are probably going to get more sophisticated in figuring out how you can take that money out, in a lot of different ways. So I think you're right. I think you can move compliance. Like as the crimes become so sophisticated, so too does the monitoring and the risk assessment of it. It's just even today we're so, I think, in the traditional finance world, we're quite far behind because everything is reactive. Now, I'm not suggesting that we need to live in a Minority Report type world where, precogs are telling you that, hey, Nick looks like he's 7.2% more likely to commit a crime because of XYZ. Like, to be clear, that's
He
not
eats
what I
too
meant.
much sushi. We
Eats
don't
too much
trust him.
sushi. Let me tell you, eats too much sushi is not going to work. But there's got to be some more intelligent tracking that doesn't happen even at a basic level. Like I was having dinner with a friend the other day who is a private banking customer at a relatively well-known institution, and he was like, he's moved something like 30 or 50% of what he's had at that institution away from them to something else, and no one has called him, right? And like no one has been like, hey, are you okay? Why are you moving your stuff away? So like we're not even sophisticated enough in TradFi to address those kinds of use cases, I believe, and I hope we're fixing them pretty quickly. Let alone getting to the level of sophistication that requires like compliance and monitoring. So I think there's an opportunity there for some, new disruptive company, or maybe some of those fintechs to disrupt this market. But I don't think we're there today.
Yeah, it's a fascinating time and a fascinating space, and it's wild to have you here because you're like literally in the middle of all of it. Um, and I get the feeling that you're working on something that might be there. Is anything you can share or?
I can't share at the moment, but stay tuned. I guess over the next couple of weeks, there's a company I'm working with at the
Oh, so
moment
soon.
that's building some really cool tech here that allows you to essentially on ramp and off ramp with an AI buddy that is
Oh, it is that app.
it's yeah it's quite intelligent. Now it
Yeah.
doesn't do the risk monitoring and the compliance piece that you're talking about, but certainly
Yeah.
from my perspective, I mean, for those of you who are listening who want to know, hey, where do I get the best USDC yield in the market? Like today, there isn't something intelligent enough to tell you here are the 16 or 17 venues that you can find, all of these great yields, either as a lender or something
Mhm.
else. Frankly, you have to go to these individual websites to essentially get them, right? And so this company is trying to solve that problem, and I feel pretty bullish about what they're building. And so let's see over the next couple of weeks.
Helping folks navigate. That's so the other side, helping consumers find their way in. Um, and it's a give model. Like you're incentivizing people to participate for a reward instead of punishing them with ACH roulette,
Yeah,
which I think
exactly.
is a
Exactly.
better.
Punishing them, or as the banks would say, saving you from yourselves, right? Really
Yeah.
need saving.
Yeah, but isn't the I read something the other day that like even Bank of America, the same core database with all your transaction data only has 5 redundancies,
Oh,
and
for real? I wouldn't be
it's like
surprised.
200 million people and there's like 5 redundancies, and you compare that to like even like a meme coin has more nodes than that. Uh,
Yeah.
it's just wild.
Yeah, I think. Look, I am not extreme enough. I would say, in my views, that I think that crypto is going to completely
Overhyped.
replace and remove all of trad. I just don't think it works like that. To be
Mm.
candid with you, because I'll give you another. Let's go back to what we were talking about 25 minutes ago. My like 91-year-old grandmother isn't going to remember a 12-word seed phrase
Nope.
and copy and
No.
paste her public key and her private key in order to receive money. Like let's be realistic about where we are today. It is not usable for a huge proportion of the population because it is unnecessarily complex. Right? Like
Mhm.
when some of the meme coins were dropping at the start of the year. Like let's just even take Trump coin as an example. It was launched on Solana. Imagine not knowing, if you were super excited about getting on that coin, not knowing how you did it, right? Like, oh, well, I downloaded Phantom Wallet. Now what do I do, right? Like, it's not easy.
Mhm.
And I think we're in a moment in crypto where, look, I think we have regulatory clarity that's hopefully going to come. People are feeling enthusiastic about it, an administration that's somewhat friendly to it. But let's not kid ourselves and do what TradFi traditionally does, which is jargon our way out into complexity to kind of justify our existence. If the mission, which was the mission when this industry started, and is, I think, still the mission for a lot of folks who are building in this space, is to bring the next 100, 200, 300 million people here, but make it easy for them and actually give them control and actually give them yield and actually do it in a cost
Mhm.
efficient way, then there's a lot of work left to do. And I
Yeah.
think the way in which you can, take inspiration from like the Venmos of, or to Zelle to a certain extent, where they validate the beneficiary, like Nick, you are who you say you are because you've got that little green check and they've made
Yeah.
sure that you're KYC. Like those kinds of things are good because ultimately it does protect you and I, right, the
Mm.
end consumer. And I think there's
Yeah.
good bits to take from TradFi.
From
There's
both.
good bits to take from crypto and DeFi as well.
Yeah. Yeah. My hunch is that like crypto as it is today is really just the rails, and like it's amazing that there are a million people who are using straight rails themselves. But you're absolutely right. Like 99% of the market's never going to do that. But when you combine the two and you put these rails in place of ACH and Swift, and people can move money in seconds around the world, and it's auditable, that's a
Yeah.
pretty powerful feature. And then you get that transaction volume in. A tool like the one you're building is even more valuable because
Yeah.
someone needs to underwrite all the transactions.
Totally.
Yeah. I think it's a special space. Not as exciting as ACH roulette though. I think whenever you send a transfer, that like 3 seconds before you get the confirmation that it was sent when the money's already out of your account is just too exhilarating to give up. So my hunch is that still owns the market for the next couple of years.
I love it, dude. Well, hey, it's a bad idea that could actually be a really freaking good one,
Yeah. Well, if you have that vision, so if we put it in your Venn diagram, the problem, if it's auditable, is a good problem to solve.
Mm-hmm.
Does the market grow? I mean, it's pretty much just traditional institutions, right?
It's just traditional institutions. So the market doesn't really grow. So you have to ask yourself, is this something that we think is going to? It doesn't just even have to scale exponentially. It's just scale over time. Don't know. And what's the story going to be? Hey, we did ACH roulette. Like, what else can we do with that? Is it a compelling story or not? I'm not sure.
So the story is the big question.
Yeah.
And the ultimate story brand, I guess, is Apple at the end of the day. Started with innovation, but really the $3 trillion problem they solved was figuring out how to tell the story better than anyone else, which is unreplicable. But cool. This has been really, really fascinating. I'm so grateful that you were so enthusiastic about something that causes so much pain for so many of us, and able to break it down in such an articulate way. That was fantastic.
I appreciate it, Nick. This was super fun.
Yeah. How do we, so you're working on your stealth project. It'll come out in a couple of weeks. How do people get in touch with you if they want you to get involved in their stealth projects?
Yeah, just please hit me up on LinkedIn. Nick's going to share the link, and I'm usually very, very responsive. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Awesome having you here.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate you.